had on one of our field days for the 5-day course, we had a 50-litre. I mean, obviously they're putting chemicals out with them, but I mean, there's no reason you can't. We had this 50-litre drone demonstrating foliar spraying macadamia and some cover crops. And it does a wonderful job. I mean, it's hovering there it's got this pushing that mist down into the leaf and swirling the leaf over so you're getting under the leaf and everything. It's actually really, really good for foliar spray.
Yeah, that's cool.
You could have one pre-programmed there that just went and did your whole block, all the pastures and everything, you know. It just goes out and does it, comes back. You've got to have some spare batteries, and it's where it's heading. There's no doubts about it. Like I had a friend who was right into it. He's got his drone license and whatever's required over here. And he said to me, okay, you've got your apple orchard. I can program, you know, in your foliar spray. We foliar spray every week on the apple orchard. And he said, well, I'll, you know, give me the cost of what it's costing you for labour. And over here we're paying like $35 an hour or something. And then there's, you know, diesel costs, which are much more expensive than for you over there. And then there's machinery costs and so forth. And give me your estimated cost per hectare. And I said, no, I want you to give me your quote first. And so he did, and it was half the price. It was literally, and he can program it. It goes down and dodges the branches and goes down there and sprays them, pushes it all in there, and then comes back when it's run out of battery. And you can even get ones that change their own batteries. You know, I mean, it's developing so quickly.
Wow. So, and they carry about 50 litres.
Yeah, 50 litres. And Dave, who's our distributor in Canada, he's working with this Russian group of inventors, and they're talking about one that can carry 1,000-litre shuttle and foliar spray. It's a huge thing. It's really like a small remote-controlled plane more than a drone, but it's just in the experimental stages. But that's all they're working. Yeah, so that technology will be the way that you spray things in the years to come.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty hand-to-mouth, so finances are pretty tight, but
yeah, you just go on. I mean, what I do, I had a farm fire on one of the farms, and I had nothing insured, and a tractor blew up in the shed, and was rats had eaten through a fuel line, and I should have had something to shut down all the electricals, but I have now, but I didn't have isolators on the tractors at that point, and the whole thing just burst into, actually it wasn't a tractor, it was a backhoe, but it burst into flame and then burnt down my whole packing shed and 7 tractors, and it was a mess, and all my equipment, all the tools. And
wow.
I had a couple of classic little machines that were sort of like buggy type things that were actually from America, but there's very few of them in Australia, and I lost them. But anyway, I was uninsured, and it was $300,000 worth of losses. But basically I would have replaced most of it on Facebook Marketplace for $100,000 in the end. I just became an expert on Facebook Marketplace. You can get some really good buys on there. Like if you Google in your region, or you go into Facebook Marketplace and check for boom sprays or whatever, you can get some really good deals.
Okay, yeah, I'll be looking. I had a question about BAM or EM. I've been using EM. Is it best subsurface, or is it good foliar as well?
Both. It works on both of them. And with EM, just be aware that you know, I obviously sell lots of different microbes and things with my company, but the reality is that no one that sells microbes, including the EM people, will tell you, you know, they'll say you can brew it once. No, you can brew it probably 2 or 3 times before you start losing the intensity of the mother culture. So you can take EM1 and multiply it with molasses more times than what they tell you. They just want to sell microbes, you know. Most microbes you can brew. Most of them are aerobic, so it's much easier to brew EM because you just need a tank with a breathing valve, one-way breathing valve on it, you know, so that's just like to brew it. But what's important when you're multiplying EM, if you're doing that expansion of EM1 through to the next level, is that it must be with a clear container, because one of the key organisms, and it's a really important organism in EM and in BAM, is called purple non-sulfur bacteria, and it's a photosynthesizing bacteria that can only multiply in sunlight. So that's why 1,000-litre shuttles, or you call them totes, are really good. Because the sun can get through the side of them. But if you're going to brew it on a smaller scale, just for the area that say you're doing the elderberries, then you might, again, on Facebook Marketplace, go and buy a 60 or 100-litre home brew kit. That they're always made with the clear, sort of not clear, but opaque, just same material that's used in a 1,000-litre tote. and that's what you brew, and it's got a breathing valve where you pick them up for $50 or something on Facebook Marketplace, and that's what you brew your EM.
Okay, I have 100-gallon compost tea brewer. I mean, that would be appropriate, right?
Well, only if the light can get through it. That's the point.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that clear.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so but it has to be sealed and it has to have that breath. See how we do it with a 1,000-liter shuttle. You just cut yourself, and you could do the same thing on your 100-gallon, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you just normally you cut a piece of garden hose, which is 12 mils, and then you drill a 1,000-liter tote. You just drill a 12 mil hole on the top of the tote, not in the lid, because then you're restricted. You can't move the lid because you've got your apparatus tied to it. So you just put it in the top. Then you put your 1 meter, 3 foot of hose through the hole you've drilled into the airspace, not into the liquid, but into the little 4 or 5 inches of airspace at the top of the tank. And then you put some silastic to seal it to make sure it can't breathe. And then you just put a Coke bottle full of water tied with plastic straps on sort of 3/4 of the way up on the metal frame of the shuttle, or we call them shuttles, you call them totes. And you put the end of the hose into that bottle full of water, and the bottle bubbles as it multiplies. And you see gloop, gloop, gloop. And when it stops bubbling, which in the summer takes about 10 days, then you're finished. And then what's great about either BAM or EM EM or BAM is that you can, they've got really good shelf life. They can sit there in the sun out in the paddock for up to 2 years and stay active. So you can just use them when you want them. So you could even brew as much as 1,000 litres if you wanted to, and then just use it when you want it. Yeah, so it's very, very useful.
I found the smell changes. It smells like good and sweet when it's done. When I check the pH and it's 3.4 or whatever they say.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it doesn't have that sweet smell. So I thought it did have a shelf life.
Well, yeah, it does, but that's exactly what it does. It changes, is it? But I've not experienced it. I've just done it with BAM. But BAM, we have it in the pattern. It never lasts 2 years, but theoretically it can, because we've extended. We've checked out to there. But we leave it sitting in the sun, and at least a year. I mean, we usually use it within 6 months or less, because we do it 2 a year usually, or 3 a year. But it still smells just not that nice, sweet fermented smell. That's important. The smell determines it. If it's changed its smell, it does mean it's losing its shelf life.
Yeah. Okay. What I don't understand about it is it's anaerobic but then.
It's really important, because you've come from Elaine's background, that she's just anti-anaerobic. I mean, there's you can drive across a really tight, closed soil if you work in that soil, and you can smell, if you had an open cab on your tractor, you could smells that smell a bit like vomit or like rotten eggs. And the rotten egg smells sulfur dioxide, and the vomit is called butyric acid, and they're made by the bad anaerobes that live because they don't need oxygen. So tight, closed soils are filled with them, and their problem is that those two substances, hydrogen sulfide and butyric acid, are actually toxic to plants. So and that's where Elaine gets her bad story from. That's true. There's those negatives. But what Professor Heger, the guy who developed EM, the question he asked and then researched was why nothing happens accidentally in a perfect blueprint called nature. Why is it that everything's got lactobacillus on it and multiple strains? Why is it that every soil, every leaf surface, every human gut, every skin on animals and humans is just smothered in billions of them? Why are they there? Nothing's accidental. And so then he looked to see what are their roles and said, oh my goodness, they do most of the same things that the good guys do. They fix nitrogen, they cellulose phosphorus, they deliver minerals, they increase plant immunity, they digest organic matter and create humus. Actually, one of them that's in EM and in BAM is called Lactobacillus plantarum. It's actually the most voracious known form of cellulose digester, so it can create humus faster than any other known organism. So, in fact, you can overdo it. Like EM, there's a big company I work with in South Africa called ZZ2, who are the largest tomato and fruit producers in the country. They've got their own trucks running all over the country. They service all the supermarkets. They brought Heger on staff for 6 months, and he taught them the whole thing. But they thought, well, the little bit works good, let's put more on. And so they were using it at high rates because they got such good results with it. Then they noticed that their carbon levels were going down, because if you don't have organic matter, if you've overdone it, that super voracious little cellulose digester, that one I said called Lactobacillus plantarum, it will actually eat humus. You can actually over-apply it. That's why you're using 10 to 20 litres per hectare maximum. And they were doing it like they said, a little bit's good, let's put more on. So twice a week they were fertigating 50 litres of it, because they could make it so cheap when you brew it yourself. But it was way too much.
So I'm a believer. I mean, I know that it's anaerobic and it's good. I guess my question is, when you take it from an anaerobic state and then you foliar spray, does it then go aerobic?
Yeah, they're really good questions. This was called a facultative anaerobe. So facultative anaerobes is one of the concerns about the hygiene required for brewing microbes generally. So say that you've got some compost and you're making an aerobic compost tea. One of the genuine concerns, and it's why it's been banned in some states on lettuce crops and things, is that if the compost wasn't well made, which is the case for a lot of compost because everyone wants their money and they don't let them finish, and you've got E. coli from the manure component that hasn't been sterilized during the heat generated during compost, because it didn't happen over the whole pile evenly, because you didn't give it enough time or you didn't do it well enough. Then E. coli is still there and active, and the problem is that E. coli is exactly the same as EM or BAM. It's called a facultative anaerobe, which means it can thrive either with or without oxygen. So when you're multiplying a compost tea that's got E. coli, you breed up E. coli, then you spray that over a lettuce crop and poison people when they eat the lettuce. So one of the tricks that you can use to make sure of that is that you add some EM to that aerobic brew, because the organisms in EM eat E. coli. So they clean that out. It's just a little strategy. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
so it's a facultative anaerobe. That's why it's so effective for stubble digestion, which is what, I don't know what you'd call it, but that's our name, is stubble digestion. It's breaking down crop residues, because you put it on in the air, and it just is quite voracious in the air, because it's facultative. It operates in the air or without oxygen. But it actually is a little bit too. See, we had a big composting company in South Africa who said, "Oh, we're going to use it in composting." I said, "Well, no, you can use it, but you use it in anaerobic composting, like EM composting. You cover it over like a silage pit, and you can do it quite quickly. It only takes 8 months." But they said, "Oh, no, it's facultative, so we'll do it aerobically." So the normal deal is, when you're making compost, is that from 1 ton of raw material, you usually get about 630 kilos of end product. Now with BAM or EM, where you do that anaerobic sort of silage pile with a big cover over it, it only takes 8 months instead of 3 to 6 months, but you get 910 kilos. So it's much more effective. You don't off gas during all the turning and so forth. It's just all trapped under there and built into the compost, and you end up with much more carbon and much more, you're not 910 kilos versus 620 or 630. But so these guys said, "Oh, we're going to use it aerobically then." So they sprayed it into their compost, worked it in. They composted ridiculously quickly, like 5 to 6 weeks, but they only got 500 kilos. It's just too active. So you're off gassing during the breakdown and all that sort of thing. So it works fine on the leaf or in the soil.
Okay. Speak to horse manure. Did you see my note that?
Yeah, Ivermectin. So have you got anything? Do you have dung beetles over there? I assume you do.
It's funny you should say. I went down that rabbit hole of, oh, these are the holy grail of pasture dung beetles, and I couldn't find any on our place. Just Tuesday, the day before yesterday, I was kicking over cow patties and I found my very first dung beetle.
Oh, well done. Yeah, it's wonderful when you get. My partner's a grazier, and she's just 500 acres, but she also works for, helps me on the farm, the apple farm, but she sort of alternates between the two. But I was out at her place, and she does the intensive cell grazing, and we do some foliar sprays and all that sort of thing on the pasture, and put some multi-species into the pasture. But oh my goodness, I mean, there was at least 30 dung beetles on every cow pad, and they were just carting it all in and spreading it through the soil. They do such a good job.
Yeah.
Well, that's great that you've got. Once they start, unless you poison them, and that is a risk. And I mean, there's nothing actually wrong with ivermectin in terms of its capacity to take out parasites and things, but it doesn't. They don't like it much if it's fresh, and it does affect the dung beetles if the horse was treated a couple of weeks before you got the dung sort of thing. And they do tend to be a bit more intensive with horses rather than cattle or sheep sort of thing in terms of anti-parasite drugs.
Yeah, since we have a handful here, and I've finally gotten my dad to not use it, and if he does use it, he tells me, and then I just avoid the manure for a good long time. But
yeah, you can put BAM in that manure and clear it out and compost it quite quickly and do that. I mean, there's quite a few growers, like even on my partner's property. Chicken manure in our country is the bargain of all bargains. If you actually do the mineral analysis on it, there's actually about $300 of minerals per ton, and you're paying $30 delivered per ton. People haven't realised how much of a bargain it is. So we got 100 tons delivered out to her farm. But obviously it's much better if it's composted, because you complex with the composting all those minerals, the leachable ones that can't leach, then the things like potassium and nitrogen that leach so readily. And so what we did was just basically she put it, which I lent her my big spreader, and she spread it, and then she's come over with BAM and sprayed BAM straight on it. And it's called in situ composting. BAM works so quickly in that scenario that it'll complex and grab everything, and you've got a really low cost mineralization of your soil with chicken manure in that way, and any negatives that are in the chicken manure are broken down so quickly by the BAM and neutralized sort of thing. So yeah.
Excellent. Do you have a US distributor?
The company's called Ag Solutions, AGSOL, Canada, and his name's Dave, and his son, who's sort of the GM, is called Braden, BRAYDEN, and they can ship it to you. And most of our things you can actually access if you need them. But Dave currently is our largest international distributor. I think we've got 50 distributors, 52, I think. And he's our largest. He's been very successful in Canada, but he ships quite a lot into the US.
So he's in Canada.
So he's shipping to that, and he's shipping to that guy who's near you somewhere.
And we got, whatever, 5, 6, 7 more minutes. Is there, looking over your recommendations, if I do try to do some of this stuff myself, like sourcing this stuff, are there any red flags like, oh, don't use that type of zinc or?
Well, yes, good questions. The biggest issue if you're going to do your own things is that you normally what I always do is I always put usually BAM or sometimes aerobic brews that we brew up, like worm extracts and all sorts of things. There's nothing goes out as the foliar mineral thing without the microbes with it. It's putting the microbes behind the minerals. You get this better uptake, better response. So that's why BAM is so user-friendly, or EM is so user-friendly, because every time you go out with a foliar, you put some microbes with it. But the condition there, and it's not going to apply to you so much, because the one mineral, and it's almost the only mineral that you don't need, is copper. You've got plenty. See, copper is just ridiculously biocidal. Even just 100 grams in the tank will kill microbes that you put into that tank. People think, oh yeah, it's a fungicide, but no, it kills protozoa, it kills bacteria, it kills everything, it kills earthworms. So it's sort of diluted by in your case. You've got plenty of carbon in the soil to buffer it when you are putting it out there, but you don't put microbes actually in the tank with it, because the copper will kill them. A lot of people don't realize that we've done the work and shown that even small amounts will kill the microbes. So,
okay.
But other than that, all the things that you need, which is potassium sulfate, magnesium sulfate, they're compatible. You put them together. I've sort of suggested the kind of rates that would be applicable. And I suggested triple 10 because it's got obviously got this NPK base, but it's got all of the amino acids and the fulvics and humics, and this thing called triacontinol, which is works wonderfully on pastures and so forth. But whether it will be cheaper to just make your own sort of versions up is what you can explore and see, because you need, like, that you need a pound, and you'd get more. Like I've suggested, sort of broadacre rates of like 3 litres a hectare of triple 10, which will sort of cover you things like molybdenum and cobalt. But if you were to, for the same dollar value, if you were to say, I'm going to put a pound of zinc, I'm going to put a pound of iron sulfate, I'm going to put a pound of manganese sulfate, I'm going to put 100 grams per acre, I'm going to put 100 grams or 40 grams, actually, even an ounce of sodium molybdate, and I'll put them all in the same tank, and I'll put some fulvic acid with them, and maybe a bit of kelp and some EM. I mean, that would probably be, you'd get more bang for your buck, basically.
And I could do all that at the same time together.
Yeah, and one spray. You could even put the urea into that, and if you wanted some urea, 10 kilos or something, 10 pounds per acre of urea into that mix, and you'd have everything covered in one spray. They're all compatible, and that's what our broadacre guys do. I encourage them to just to make their own. Some of them say, "Well, I'd rather just buy it because it's less hassle," but it's much cheaper to just do it yourself like that.
And when I'm out there looking for these products, those are going to be commonly found.
Well, I think so. I mean, I'm not in your region, but here it's, you can, on any, what we call them rural stores, of people, there's the rural suppliers who supply, the NPK and the chemicals and all that sort of stuff. And most of them will have, if they haven't got it, they'll order it for you.
Okay.
There's plenty of people. I mean, in horticulture, that's what, people fertigate. They just put nutrition in a fertigation tank and foliar spray and fertigate it out at the same time as irrigation. And they use all of those things. So you buy mag sulfate in bags for $20 a bag or something. And potassium sulfate is much more expensive. It's sort of more like $1.50 a kilo, maybe less, but I'm talking Australian dollars. But you're using 8 kilos per hectare is the rate that is typically used. And it gives you a very nice response. And you need some sulfur as well. So you sort of got a double hit with that. So it's a good benefit to you. It's an interesting one, the potassium sulfate, because it's been, no one's ever sort of favoured it or pushed it as a foliar because it's got low solubility. Like urea is 1 kilo to 1 litre. Literally, it's super soluble. But potassium sulfate is 1 kilo to 10 litres. So everyone says, "Oh, it's not worth using." You can't. Well, you can, because even in pasture farming, where they might just use, or in broadacre, which is wheat and cereal crops and legumes and things, they might just use 100 litres per hectare, whatever that is per acre. And well, you need 8 kilos, and 8 kilos will go into 100 litres, because you can get as many as 10 kilos, but you're right on the edge of solubility. But 8 kilos works beautifully, and so that's the lowest rate that people use, and 8 kilos goes into it. So it's not an issue at all. It's just people have misunderstood. And many soils need more sulfur, yours included, and so you're getting 2 in 1 straight into the plant, bypassing everything, any lockup problems, and just going straight into the plant. You get a nice response. You could set up one foliar that you did, even once a month, that would have a real good coverage. It's all there on the soil test, all the things you need. And you just put them all into one spray and put them out. You've got to have a way to, you've got to have a mixing tank or agitation in your tank to dissolve them. You're going to do it straight into the spray tank. Otherwise, you have a separate mixing tank with a pump swirling it around, and then pump it from that into your spray tank. We'll have to work out how to do that. But, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to give it a try. The last question on like a cover crop, do you think it's beneficial for me to let my cover crop go to seed and not graze it off?
It depends on what you're chasing, basically. If you wanted to gain the value of the seed and the plants that come from it, and you can still graze it off a couple of times before you then let it come to seed again. That's what people often do.
Okay.
But how are you putting it out? Have you got a direct drill, or are you just broadcasting, or how are you putting the cover crop seed out?
I'm direct broadcasting.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing to broadcast and then slash to give more of a base for the seed to take off in, because you've got that organic matter from the slashing over it. Or you could use cattle in there. This is one of the really common things that people use. And it's become quite popular for people that sell graze, because the concept of cell grazing, I mean, all the stuff, but the concept of cell grazing is just basically saying, okay, the definition of science in Webster's dictionary is literally adherence to natural laws and principles. There's a whole, perfect blueprint out there, and we're supposed to learn from it. And what we said was, we can do better than that, and that arrogance has brought us to our knees, staring down the abyss in some ways, because it was we thought we could do better than perfect. But if you use that analogy of learning from nature, then you say, okay, what's the most productive areas ever? And why were they productive? And how can we mimic that? And that's where the whole concept of cell grazing comes from, because the most productive soils ever in the history of mankind were the Great Plains. And they were productive because they had those huge herds of bison, with a predator effect, Indians or wolves on either side. And so you weren't choosy about what you ate. But the main thing was, and they did that themselves, it wasn't someone managing them, you never eat below 4 inches. You never graze below 4 inches. It's just a recognition that if you dig down into the soil, say you've got 6 inches above ground of whatever your crop is or whatever your grass is, you dig down, basically most of the root will be the main feeder, the main root. There'll be some outbranching, sometimes with crops like lucerne, they go down for meters, but generally if you've got, say, 8 inches above, you've got 8 inches below. And if you graze to 6 inches, the roots prune themselves to 6 inches. You graze to 4 inches, they prune themselves. You graze to the bottom, like your dad's doing with his horses, you take it down to the dirt, you've got nothing. The roots prune themselves right to nothing. So you're basically rearing back with trying to get started again with no solar panel that fires everything. The plant's pumping down sugars from photosynthesis from its leaves. And so what the buffalo were doing, it was just nature just knew, was that they never grazed below 4 inches. They had that huge impact. And it's like you can't have too many animals. It's just how long you leave them in there. But they had that huge impact of the urine and the wee and the crushing of plants, that some of which are then broken off and would turn into humus with all the biostimulation from the urine and the manure. But they left that solar panel there, and then they come back a few months later and repeated the process. And that's all you're copying really when you do cell grazing. The bottom line is you want 4 inches, you want a solar panel there to drive the thing. And however you do that, doesn't matter how you do it, but that's your main goal, is you want to not graze below that 4 inches.
Yeah. Well, it looks like I'm going to be looking for a spray boom and rig, some system to do that. I mean, it's either the tractor, or do you ever do them behind a quad?
Yeah, you can do that. You could do it behind a quad or a side by side or whatever. We do a cover cropping for just a side by side with a small one between the interrows. It's a 6-in-1 thing that does, cuts the slot, drops the seed in, and then smooths it over and pads it down, sort of thing. And you put fertilizer and seed in the same. We just use the natural stuff, granulated composted chicken manure with some nutrients in it, going down at the same time, and it does a nice job. And the quad, the side by side, the UTV or whatever, does that nicely, or a 4-wheel bike or whatever. You can do that. But just if you go on Facebook, just see what's available. And you just got to see what will, you could buy a boom spray for $3,000 or $2,000, that kind of money. Just see what's available. But if you've got any questions along the way, I'm happy to help. This doesn't cost you any money to email me and ask a question, and I'll respond to you.
Awesome. I appreciate it, because I'm just looking for a appropriate for foliar spray, right?
Yeah. But I mean, the only difference then when you're looking is that, as the trees get bigger, then you use a blow mister. Well, you're not going to need that for the pasture. So really, you're just going to go for, it'll just be like a 600-litre tank on the back of that you put on the back of your tractor, using 3-point linkage with that pump. And it's, there's lots of them out there. The most common brand here is called Sylvans, but I don't know whether you have that brand over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be looking tonight.
Okay. It's lovely to talk to you, and keep me posted about the differences you see now that when you start sort of addressing the root cause. You've been doing one part of it perfectly, and now you just need to fill the jigsaw out and do the other part. And you've got this. Basically, it's growing good quality, nutrient dense crops, and lots of them is about microbes, minerals, microbes, and humus. Well, you've taken care of the microbes and the humus beautifully. Now you just got to do this mineral side, and you've really covered all bases, and that's where you'll start kicking some goals.
Man, I've been sleeping at the wheel on the minerals.
And that's so I sort of object to Elaine in the sense that there's all these people say, oh, you can't use anaerobes, they're all bad. No, there's things called good anaerobes, and you don't need minerals. Australia, there's old super weathered soil, Sometimes you test it, there's just nothing in it. My partner, she's got very light sandy soils where she is with her 500 acres, and there's just nothing in there. You can't grow things with nothing in there. You can put all the biology in the world, and you've got to have some mineral base to work on. And again, when that kind of there's not high dollar value grazing beef, so we just do it with foliars, and it works beautifully. So yeah.
Well, if you ever come to the West Coast, next time you do, let me know.
Yeah, I'll come in, because when I come over, I'm no doubt I'll be back. I had quite a nice crowd for this amongst the nut growers, where I did the nut growers talks, and I went and saw Andy on the way down to that. So on your coast, so if I'm down that way, I'll call in and say hello.
Yeah, definitely do. We have some amazing MacNut trees, and I think I'm going to plant more of them because
have you?
They're phenomenal. I mean, yeah, just big, well, you can't see, but big size.
Oh, beautiful.
And
That's really, oh yeah, you definitely want to look at that.
And we don't really water them too much. You get them established, and then they're really drought tolerant. And
no, I mean, they're a native Australian tree, and they they were grown without irrigation, but we've got so dry in some regions now that a lot of people found they got better production when they irrigated, but they'll grow quite well dry land. I mean, I've got a couple of just ones in the orchard, in the home food part of one of my farms, and they've never been irrigated, but they don't produce nuts that big. You've got a really good soil for macas, is what you're looking at there. That's really good. So that if something grows well, that's just a guideline of what you should plant. If something grows, if you have a weed that grows, one of the strategies that people have developed here amongst the consultants is that if there's a weed you need to develop, and just go on ChatGPT and you find out all the stuff you want to know. But if there's a weed that proliferates on your farm, if you want to do some commercial things, then you look at the family grouping of that Asteraceae or whatever the weed is, and then you look at commercial crops within that same spacing, and you can bet your $1 that commercial crop is going to thrive if the weeds thrive there. And what happens is that they actually overtake, and you don't have the weed pressure. The crop does the job, and that's the sort of things you might build into a cover crop. If you've got dominant weeds, you just go to ChatGPT. Have you used ChatGPT before?
Yeah.
Just use that and just say, okay, I've got this weed, what family is it, and what's commercial crops around that same family, and you'll get all the answers, and then you'll see if it's something you can build into a cover crop, and it'll thrive and push the weeds out of the scenario.
Good advice.
Weeds are there as a signpost. They're there because there's a certain lack, or there's too much of one thing. It could be calcium in this instance, or too little potassium, or whatever. But if they do well, then that cover crop, that commercial crop, which you can build into a cover crop, or perhaps grow as a commercial crop. But if your macadamia trees are producing like that, plant some. Macadamias, they've had a little bit of a doldrums here, because we had this, it was a ridiculous thing, this huge consortium of macas in Australia. They dumped about 18 months or 2 years ago, they dumped this huge amount of stored nut that they had on the marketplace, and just crashed the prices globally. And they're still not fully recovered. But the reality is that it's a wonderful nut. I mean, it's the nicest nut in the world, and it's got lots of good benefits. The oils are beautiful in there, and it's from a longer term perspective, it's a certainty that it's going to be worthwhile. And if they grow well in your place, go for them.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's really good. Those look like beautiful nuts.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. I'll go. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I really enjoy your podcast, so keep it up.